So this is just going to be part 2 of the video. I didn't want to make it too long, just in case some people had things to do. I didn't want to go ahead and make some sort of 40-minute video, so I may even take this into parts here. So we've gone over how to sort of structure our first paragraph, but I haven't talked to you yet about our introduction, how to create this confident argument. And I'm just going to write out here, I've prepared a introductory paragraph that I created a couple of days ago, and I'm just going to type it out here, and I'm going to show you, I'm going to walk you through it and explain what I mean by all of it. So it is true that I cannot type that in at up until Act 3, Othello's authority is one of his most defining characteristics. I've also made a few mistakes in this introduction, but I'm going to identify them for you as he is given the role of more. His authority as a high-ranking general is suggested through his honesty and nobility, nonetheless. Hopefully you noticed that point there. Nonetheless, his position as a tragic hero demands that he is of a position of greatness before he suffers his downfall. His authorial characteristics. We'll say persona. His authorial persona of honesty become his hamasha due to his insecurities drawn out by Iago. And then we just sort of conclude at any chance of Othello seeming to be admirable and virtuous are diminished toward the end of the play as he ironically murders his wife in a country owned by the god goddess of love. Alright, so this is what I created a couple days ago. It's quite long, but it's definitely the sort of length you're looking for. I just want to show you what I've done that's good and what I've done that definitely needs to be worked on. And this is always good. You should always write up your paragraphs, your introductions of your previous essays, and you should pull them apart. See what you've done right, see what you can take out, what you don't need, see what you can put in that you do need. So, it is true that up until Act 3, this is a good part. People here like to put pronouns, etc. No, that's not a good idea. You need to write with confidence. You need to create this argument of confidence. So you have to be direct and thorough. It is true that up until Act 3, Othello's authority is one of his most defining characteristics, as he is given the role of Moor. Now, what's good is we've got our one side of the argument. And we're also going to show what we're showing the marker. We're showing your teacher how you're going to back up your agreement of the question. Othello's authority makes him ultimately admirable. And then we're explaining this. So, first of all, this part here, defining characteristics. This is probably not as good as saying maybe it is, maybe you could say it is true that up until Act 3, Othello's authority makes him admirable because of his high-ranking army role, and then he's given the role more. And then obviously I'd have to alter this next bit, but here I've sort of explained it to make it a little bit better for defining his characteristics, but maybe I could have just put this part right in here. But anyway, his authority as a high-ranking general is suggested through his honesty and nobility. So here we are going to probably use the themes of honesty and nobility, virtue of Othello to try and back up your agreement. And here we are turning to the second side of argument. And you can start this at the beginning of the introduction or the end. So I've gone his position as a tragic hero. So here we're obviously relating to Aristotle's definition of a tragedy, and then we're showing and we're explaining it, blah blah blah, demands that he is of a position of greatness before he suffers his downfall. And then we're saying his authorial persona of honesty becomes his hamartia. So here we're showing this irony, and we actually say the irony. We state the irony right here. Irony. And we're saying how this sort of ironical, is it's almost funny that Othello's greatest characteristics have led to his downfall, but we're saying that because his insecurities have been drawn out by Iago. So any chance of Othello seeming to be admirable and virtuous are diminished toward the end of the play, as he ironically murders his wife in a country owned by the goddess of love. Now, you might think the goddess of love at the end, you probably don't need that. Fine. But I think it just adds in more about what you're going to introduce in terms of context, which is very important in my opinion. We have Venice, we have Aphrodite's, the goddess of love, you know. It's very important to put in, I feel. So this is what you probably need to do when writing an introduction. You need to write your introduction. Obviously not in the exam, but for introductions, just on a normal day, write them out, pick them apart, see what you've done right, see what you can take out, and so forth. And really what you're wanting to do in introduction is reference context, and create your argument. You want to create your argument so the person marking knows which parts you're arguing for the statement you're given and which arguments you're arguing against the statement. So it's very clear and it's very confident, so they know what you're talking about. Because if right from the beginning, if they think, oh, this guy, he's maybe read the book once, he maybe knows a little bit of context, but overall, he doesn't really know what he's doing because it's not very confident, then you're not gonna pick up the marks that you're looking for. So I'm not saying this is the ideal introduction. This is very, very similar to some other Band 5 introductions that I've previously seen, and I'll go over those in maybe another video. But yeah, so this is probably the end of this 2-part series, I think. Just part 6 I wanted to explain with what to write about next. Really, when you've discussed your first quote, you've backed up with themes, then you've linked it to another quote, maybe another act. You've sort of said, you have to say, is this a parallel or is this a paradox? Because the acts in Othello, the scenes in Othello, tend to either parallel each other or paradox each other. And this is very important to note because this is quite a well-known technique used by Shakespeare. So you say, for example, up here I've used his morship, and then I'm linking this maybe to Iago's character and how he controls the play in Act 2, Scene 3. Well, this would probably parallel, right? Because Iago's controlling the scene in Act 1, Scene 1, and he's also controlling the scene here. So we can see how it's paralleled, and then we back this up with some context that we've maybe got, and if maybe there's no context that you can think about to go with this, definitely try and use a critic. So for example, if I went down the Act 2 Scene 3 route, I can't really use this context of people with army rolls, blah blah blah, because it completely juxtaposes the argument that I've made in the first place, except from the fact that maybe it's ironic. But we're not talking about this. We want to back it up with maybe the critic of Machiavelli. Maybe something like that. Whereas instead, if you carried on with Act 1, Scene 1, you could maybe talk about irony and say, well, Cassio was chosen instead of Iago, and Iago's jealous, and people with army rolls had this, and so forth. And after you either talk about your context, after you've explained your context and explained your critic, with maybe even another link, you need to think about introducing a different point. And I'm not saying the best way to create you have to keep thinking about creating an argument. And for introduction, you have to have for and against. So this is intro. For your second paragraph, you can have for or against. For your next one, you can have for or against. But when you're doing this, these two paragraphs have to flow into each other. You could say from here, Iago's jealous or whatever, or you could carry on saying, well, Othello doesn't really seem admirable because the way Iago has presented him. And then you could say in this next paragraph, well, although Othello's authority can be perceived in this way because of, say, for example, his presentation in front of the Duke, whatnot. Because of this, he is actually able to show the audience that he is an admirable character because he can prove his authority in situations. So you really have to flow into each one, making this sort of essay all into one. You can't have this separate thing. And I think that's what really helps define someone into a band 5 compared to a band 4 or 3. I'm not saying my writing is perfect. My writing is far from perfect, but these are just some tips I've picked up that I think are very helpful in writing your essay. I might make a video later on of actually writing this essay because I think this essay would be quite a nice one to write. There's also a couple of other more in-depth, like quite deep concepts about Othello as a book that I probably want to cover on this YouTube, though I don't really feel like making, a whole analysis on the play as a whole, unless anyone really wants me to do that, because I think it's just a waste of time. As long as you know how to structure your essay, and you can remember some quotes, and you can explain these quotes, I think you're good. But to achieve band 5, you really need some deeper context, some deeper analysis, and in order to achieve that, you have to do some extra reading around the book. So I'll probably make some extra videos on just some deeper analysis that I've come up with myself. I feel like I don't really want to explore other people's concepts too much. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you can get a bit out of what I've done for my introduction and how I tend to structure my essays. Just think of flow. Just think of flow. You can't just introduce another point. So thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.